Hi, it's Alberto Gandolfi in Goldman Sachs Utilities Research. As part of our Carbonomics conference, I'm very glad to have here with us Climeworks. Today, we're really going to talk about cutting-edge technology of carbon capture sequestration from the air, and very excited to have here with us the brains behind this company and this idea, the co-founders Christoph and Jan, and co-founders and co-CEOs of the company. And I'm very happy to have this opportunity to learn about carbon capture sequestration, one of these two big innovation pillars very present throughout the Green Deal papers published by the European Union. Now, without further ado, I'm going to start perhaps from Jan, asking a little bit about, how did Climeworks start? What was the vision and what was the problem that you're trying to solve?
Yeah, thank you very much for the nice introduction. So I'll start with the why for Climeworks, so with our purpose. So what we are trying to do at Climeworks is empowering people to reverse climate change. So it's a big goal, a big purpose to do something about global warming and to help in accomplishing that goal by removing CO2 from the atmosphere. So what Climeworks practically does is we are building machines that capture CO2 from the atmosphere, so from ambient air as the air around us. And we can then use that CO2 to safely and permanently store it underground. Or we could also use it to make useful products out of that. If we think about the scale at which we aim at operating, it is actually about starting an entire new industry. If we listen to science, what science tells us today, in order to reach the goals of the Paris Agreement, we would need to remove something such as 10 or even up to 15 billion tons of CO2 from the air by mid of the century in order to limit global warming to 1.5 or at least 2 degrees Celsius. In order to reach these dimensions, what we need to do ultimately, we need action from the big corporates as well as from states, so from governments. That is that level that is ultimately required. However, in order to get there, what we strongly believe in, it needs action and it needs enthusiasm from everyone, so from all of the people, and that's a nice lead over to our vision of Climeworks, which is inspiring 1 billion people, so 1/10, so every 10th person on Earth, to remove carbon from the atmosphere. We strongly believe if we can motivate and enable the people to contribute something, this will then trigger action on the corporate and on the state level.
That's very clear. Can I ask you a quick follow-up on this? If I'm not mistaken, I think the percentage of carbon in the atmosphere is something between 0.02% and 0.04%. So, I mean, what you're talking about here is really interesting and cutting edge. And how can you actually, do you think you can make it happen from a scale perspective?
Yeah, what you're saying is right. We have 400 ppm of CO2 in the air. That's 0.04%. So just 1 out of 2,000 particles or molecules in the air is actually CO2. So it's about fishing 1 out of many molecules out there. However, it sounds more tricky than it is actually. Like removing CO2 from a gas in a diluted form, in principle, that is something that has been doable since decades, if not since a century. Think about a submarine, think about a space station or a spaceship. Those are all applications where you need to remove CO2 because that's basically what we exhale as humans. So that's doable. The challenge that we are facing and that we are working on and have been working on for the past 10 years is making that scalable and making that cheap at the required scales needed to positively influence climate change.
Thank you. Maybe as we're talking about the past 10 years in the technology, can you tell us where the technology has been in the past 10 years? What has been the journey up until here? And maybe as you explain that, can you give us a brief how explanation of how actually you physically capture carbon from the atmosphere.
Yeah. Maybe in very simple words, the last 10 years in one sentence, like today, we are in a position where we're able to build large machines, as Jan described before, that take CO2 from the air and permanently store it underground. So, and you as persons or as companies or even as governments can use that service today. So that's a quite fundamental development from, well, sitting on the floor of our laboratory 10 years ago with a small laboratory prototype that captured some grams of CO2 from the air. And today we have machines that capture kilotons. That is a scale up actually by a billion, acknowledging that a million is ahead of us, but also acknowledging that we have gone a very long way. And the most important steps in the last 10 years have been really the commissioning of a large commercial scale plant 3.5 years ago that is operating since then, more or less continuously, producing CO2 for no one less than the Coca-Cola company. So I have a bottle of mineral water in front of me. That's a premium Swiss mineral water, a brand owned by the Coca-Cola company. The plant we're using to serve them is certified by the Coca-Cola company, speaking for the high standards of the operations and of the CO2. And so that was in the year 2017. And in the same year, actually, we took a plant online in Iceland that is taking CO2 from the air and storing it underground in a permanent way. And underground, the CO2 is turned into stone. That's actually how that looks like, a rock sample from Iceland, where you can see the white parts on it are sort of the mineralized stone. So those are really the two most substantial developments of the last 10 years, technology and market-wise. What happened with that? Today we are seeing first corporates putting money on the table for CO2 removal as a service. To give examples, known examples in the public are the North American companies Stripe and Shopify, or also the German car maker Audi, who is using our service to remove CO2 in a permanent way from the atmosphere. Well, also what we have seen are quite substantial investments in our company, at least comparing to where we're coming from. Where we're coming from is a state of almost no funding available at all, neither from a public side nor from investment side. So the early years were very strong bootstrapping in order to get it done. And in the last 10 years, we raised more than $170 million in the form of equity and grants. And we grew the company from, well, the two of us as founders, and today having around 150 employees in Switzerland, Germany, and partners in the Netherlands. Besides those developments, which are all like happened in or around of Climeworks, there are quite substantial developments also in the broader context. Also there, maybe comparing to where we're coming from, when we started 10 years ago, among the most renowned scientific communities, the American Physical Society more or less suggested in a report to not follow direct air capture, like how the topic, what we are following is referred to as. Whereas in 2018, the World Climate Council, IPCC, suggested that climate targets cannot be achieved without removing carbon dioxide from the air on a massive scale. So that's, you hardly can imagine a more drastic change from science recommending not to do to science strongly recommending to pursuing it. And we also see that already on governmental side, many governments committing to net zero targets, like California in 2045, Switzerland in 2050. So there many countries committing to that target, as well as companies committing to net zero pledges, or even net negative pledges like Microsoft committing to becoming carbon negative by 2030 and removing thereafter all historic emissions. So those, in a nutshell, the developments of the last 10 years, and as mentioned, quite dramatic from like small scale to not proposing it to today, bigger scales, and community strongly urging that this is needed.
Thank you, Christoph. That's very interesting. And I was thinking, in the past 10 years, you went from turning around the scientific community in a way, becoming more central to policy, and you started to see more commercial applications. You mentioned Coca-Cola, Audi. What do you think is the next 5 to 10 years? What lies ahead of us? Is it a big technological improvement, a big breakthrough, or is it simply more scale, more commercial opportunities? Where do you see the path for you the next 5 to 10 years?
And maybe to start with, just emphasizing again, is that where we are standing today, it's actually a pretty crazy situation. So if we listen to what policymakers tell us today, is basically there is very little chance of achieving climate targets, so stopping global warming, without technologies that can actively remove carbon from the air. So that's a statement, and that's quite a strong statement. And in contrast, there's only a handful of small companies with something like less than 1,000 employees worldwide working on these solutions. So that is why I believe that this whole sector, and as I said before, it's something like the start of a new industry, will massively develop over the next couple of years. There will be new players in the field, and the existing players will grow, as Climeworks is doing, and as we've been leading the field over the past years, we are aiming to continue that. And specifically, what do we aim at doing? Looking back in the past 10 years, we have shown that it works. We can build machines that extract CO2 from the air, that store it underground permanently and safely. So if we turn CO2 into stone, as you see it here, that's safe down there for a million of years. So that's a very important accomplishment. Now, the next step that's ahead of us will be scaling. So we need to show that it's doable and at a scale level at reasonable costs. So what we believe that the cost potential of our technology and similar technologies goes down to $100 per ton CO2 removed. So we believe in 5 to 10 years, a range of $100 to $200. That's what we are aiming at. That potential we want to use in the next 3 to 5 years. It'll be probably somewhere in the range of $200 to $300. Looking at where we are coming from, we are about a factor of 3 away from these next goals. That is, by the way, a relatively small factor if we compare it to other industries, if we compare it to costs of early solar PV or early wind power. Those industries achieved much stronger or steeper cost reductions. So we believe it's actually, we are already at a good state, but there's work to do. So our job for the next 3 to 5 years is scaling. So from thousands of tons to millions of tons, and that's what we're in. We do have a very concrete scale-up roadmap that we are following. We are just in the process of building the largest ever direct air capture and storage plant in Iceland right now. That'll be a scale-up of a factor of roughly 5 from where we're coming from now, and we are already planning for 2 years ahead of that a next scale up of another factor of 10 to 20 beyond that. And with these scale up, there will be a corresponding cost reduction going hand in hand with that. And obviously, in order to finance that, we'll need the pioneering customers, such as companies with their climate targets that are paying us to remove CO2 from the air from them in order to achieve their climate targets. So we are enabling them to achieve their climate targets by really pure, permanent, and measurable solutions. So we need those customers, those companies who are paying us, and also private people, private individuals who could go to our website and purchase a subscription for carbon dioxide removal, what we're offering. That's also something what we are aiming to scale, and not only for the purpose of making sales and creating revenues, which then enable us to scale more and to finance our scale-up roadmap, but also to bring the message out there. Like, we believe once we are able to attract hundreds of thousands or millions of people to follow this will then trigger more action on a policy level, on a corporate level, and others.
So thanks for that. Very exhaustive, very interesting. So where do you see the applications in the next 5 to 10 years? You've been talking about big corporates right now. Is that, you think, going to be the core business, or do you envisage some sort of maybe regulation at the EU level? So I'm just trying to understand, is it the best way to apply your machines to a factory, or should you just go for very big machines and put them in a particular part of the world where carbon concentration is even higher? I don't know, very close to a big industrial center, just as an example. I'm just trying to picture.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, our main application is to take CO2 from the air and to permanently store it underground. We really do focus on CO2 removal from the air. If you do not remove CO2 from the air, you have no chance to reverse climate change. If you remove CO2 from combustion flue gases, which is, side note, super important to do, because that will help us to bring us to zero. But today, as of 2020, zero is not sufficient to achieve climate targets. And this is the play we are having. We are really targeting the CO2 that is already in the atmosphere. So we are targeting either unavoidable emissions or historic emissions that have to go back into the ground. And the way we do it, well, we showed it, it's the stone. We pump it underground several hundred meters, where it turns into this white rocks, and it stays there for millions of years. The business model we're using is that we are selling that as a service, something for the books, and I'm sure it'll make some people laugh. We're both engineers, and we, of course, were in love and are still in love with the machines we're building, and we were dreaming of selling the machines. But take a guess, of course, no one had the business model to buy direct air capture machines and operate them. Hence, we moved from being a pure technology provider or machine provider, so to say, to becoming a solution provider and providing this service as a service. And who are we targeting? Well, we're targeting, or like we talk of B2H, business to humans. At the end of the day, no matter who you're targeting, whether you're targeting people, companies, or governments, you're talking to people, right? And you need to convince people, especially in our field, since it's such a young field and so much education is needed to understand like the big picture and how it works. And in such, our positioning is really towards people. We do have an offering for people. Go to climeworks.com, where we offer CO2 as a service really for you. We do offer the same service to companies, and the examples are out there, Stripe, Shopify, Audi as examples. And as explained by Jan, clearly the market will be driven by them. And of course, we do hope, we currently do not have that, but of course we do hope and we do expect, certainly, that also governments will use that service sooner or later in order to achieve their climate targets.
Thank you. That's very, sorry.
To add one thing, what by like this combination of direct air capture and storing CO2, this opens up already also business opportunities for several countries. So what we always need, in addition to what we are doing at Climeworks, is a site to store CO2. So we are now in the process of looking at several locations and countries worldwide where this could be actually even a new business of storing CO2 underground. As an example, we are very active in Iceland. We have local partners in Iceland. That's the company Carbfix and Reykjavik Energy. They have developed a very nice storage method to turn the CO2 into stone. We are talking to other countries in Europe, in North America, in Middle East. So it's really, in terms of application, we are trying to find multiple locations where this can be done and where this can open also new local business opportunities.
And Ian, thank you for the follow-up. I just maybe want to ask a question. How big are the machines? And do you envisage multiple machines where the carbon sequestrated is going to be then transported to a centralized storing location? Or do you envisage very big machines which store carbon very close to the site where the machine operates?
Yeah, very, very important question, and a good question. The model we are following is a modular model, like a model as known from the photovoltaic industry or the wind turbines, or at the end of the day, automotive company cars are at the end of the day also modules. We are following that path, meaning our technology is modular. We call the modules CO2 collectors, like the solar collector, and plants, when scaling, will be composed of many more CO2 collectors and arranged, so to say, in clusters. The sizing of such plants will be heavily determined by the energy supply, and we haven't touched that point. But to Climeworks, it's a very important aspect that the energy we use is sustainable or renewable energy in order to enable the highest efficiency possible, meaning the highest drawdown of carbon from the air. Like when our technology is powered by renewable energy and CO2 permanently stored underground, per 1 ton of CO2 we're taking from the air, we're emitting as gray emissions 0.1 tons. This is a very, very good number, and that will in the near future develop rather to even 0.05 tons re-emitted, hence 5%. Therefore, a very strong CO2 reduction potential from the atmosphere. And talking about sizes, well, you all can imagine large solar fields or large wind farms. And like, say, a 250 megawatt wind farm or a solar field, which are typical sizes, would be serving maybe 0.5 to 1 megaton direct air capture facility. And then the dimension, so to say, of the plant is heavily influenced or is determined, so to say, by the renewable energy source and less by the direct air capture supply. The direct air capture will be a tiny fraction, so to say, of the footprint of the renewable energy source.
That's fabulous. Thank you. That's very, very interesting. I maybe wanted to ask you very briefly about challenges. By the sound of things, it's not a technological challenge. You have already overcome that. I mean, I'm not saying it's simple, but it looks like you already have a functioning technology. So is the challenge finding clients, finding locations? Is it the challenge the raw materials you may need throughout the process? Maybe you can talk about any bottlenecks you could see in the supply chain or in regulation.
Yeah, starting from the end, maybe the supply chain, that is something we are very closely monitoring. So like from the very beginning of our R&D process, we are excluding solutions which rely, as an example, on rare materials. So we are not employing materials in our technology that are limited in terms of global supply. So we did all these studies. What if we scaled up this technology tomorrow to a scale of billions of tons per year? And there is nothing that we have found that is limiting. So no, like we are only using fractions of the materials that are worldwide produced. I like my favorite example is if we wanted to capture 8% of global emissions to start with, then we would, like, the question is how big would our plants be? So our plants consist of shipping containers, and we would use something like 700,000 shipping containers, and that is the tiny amount of shipping containers that pass through the largest harbor of the world, which is Shanghai Harbor, in just 2 weeks. So that's, I think, a good symbol to show like the amount of material, of steel, of structures you need to put up is really a small fraction of the worldwide industry's output. So that's all, I would say, under control, and I don't see bottlenecks there. It's really the largest or the biggest bottleneck is where it comes to energy supply. So a scaling of direct air capture always has to go hand in hand, as Christoph just explained, with the scaling of renewable energy. In terms of other challenges, if we think about the next 5 years, we were speaking about cost reduction, so getting down by this factor of 3. And it's not a question if that is possible. It is clearly possible. Other industries have shown much like higher factors in terms of cost reduction. However, it will require capital and it will require pioneering customers. So similarly to the photovoltaic industry, if you look at them, they started with very expensive modules, even much more expensive that we are doing, and they found niche markets. So they found applications in space, they found applications in remote power requirements when you had something like a mobile antenna somewhere out in the desert where there's just no grid available. There you wouldn't care so much how much a panel costs. So we are trying to do the same, looking for pioneering customers, and the challenge is finding enough pioneering customers, like companies who are saying, I want to remove my emissions with the best, safest, purest technology that is available, and I'm ready to pay more than I could get somewhere else on the market where I could purchase some certificates which are like of a different quality of product. So we need to bridge these next couple of years where technology is still more expensive than the long-term goal, find the customers and find the capital in order to do that.
Yeah, and thank you for this. So we're coming towards the last 5 minutes, I think, of this very interesting, insightful interaction. I wanted to ask you one specific question and then give you maybe a minute or two for final remarks on your end. So you mentioned the bit cost. You talked about, maybe reaching 100 euros per ton, probably with 200 to 300 intermediates. Today is much higher. Can you maybe tell us where we are today in terms of costs and compare where we are today versus where we are going with other similar technologies that may reverse climate change? I'm thinking, I don't know, electric vehicles. I'm thinking any energy efficiency in buildings or construction. Probably renewables are much cheaper today. But maybe you can compare with other technologies or abatement measures that are in your league of cost and see where you can outperform in cost going forward, if that makes sense.
That's a very interesting and timely question, Alberto. The Columbia University, as to give an example, just put out a paper where they compared CO2 abatement cost of different technologies. And we all know the I would say, cheap solution or the economical solutions, but maybe it's counterintuitive for some to understand that, for example, broadly used and heavily subsidized and financed things like photovoltaics, for example, have CO2 abatement costs in the range of $150 up to $2,000, really depending whether it's utility scale or rooftop, depending whether it's a very sunny region or a not so sunny region. So as in a nutshell, for example, rooftop solar in California has a CO2 abatement cost when comparing to the grid mix today of $300. You might not know that. And electric vehicles, for example, have CO2 abatement costs in the range of $300 to $650. And also heavily used, a lot of money flowing in there, a lot of subsidies. And in that context, our starting point with 600 to 800 today is in good neighbors, so to say. And for us, there are no indications that not subsidies or markets of the sizes as in the experience at the photovoltaic industry or electric car industry would be possible for what we are doing, since again, like data points are out there that this has been done for CO2 abatement costs in exact that range.
Thank you. Very interesting. And do you believe you can benefit from any EU funding for some of your projects?
Well, at the moment we are, and this is again looking to the future, the big game ahead of us. At the moment, our plans are heavily equity financed by Climeworks, and our homework is to become bankable. That's really the big thing to scale. And in such to reduce the fraction of Climeworks equity in the plans and get more debt or other equity in there. But clearly, very important to state that all plans I've mentioned in the beginning, like the plant doing that, turning CO2 into stone, and the plant providing CO2 for the Coca-Cola company, they all received support either from the Swiss governmental side or from the European Union. And that has been a very important support in order to get it going.
Great. So indirectly, you do essentially get fantastic. This was very insightful. We're starting to run out of time, so maybe I'll ask you if you have a 2-minute final remarks that you want to share with us and with the investors watching this intervention. And over to you.
And maybe something on a smaller scale with Christmas ahead of us. you're all looking for Christmas present, and I'm sure no one has an as impactful Christmas present as we have. So we hope to see you all on climeworks.com, and maybe you'll find the right Christmas present for your loved ones, or for the employees of your companies, or for your board, etc.
Yeah, and following on that, I'll close the circle to the beginning of our discussion here. Our vision being inspiring 1 billion people on this earth to remove carbon from the atmosphere. And we hope that today we inspired some more people, and we need action. I think over the past years, many corporates, many people have spoken about required action to like follow pure and long-term solutions to fix our climate issue. And I think we are offering something that can be really a vital pillar on which a climate mitigation strategy will be built on. And yeah, we hope to motivate as many as possible. And we, as of today, provide a platform, provide an instrument where others can take action on a corporate or on a private level, and we'll invite everyone to join.
Well, Jan, Christoph, thank you so much for being with us. This was very insightful. I wish you all the best in the future endeavors, and I'm very proud to have hosted this session, and really all the best in this wonderful adventure. And thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you, Alberto.
Thanks, Alberto. Thank you very much.
Thank you.